Somebody is at the door. All right, it is time to get going. So it is 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and that means it's time to start Finding Your Own Damn Way, a show on Beaver politics, where we come together to talk about Canadian politics, to talk about the social justice issues that impacts our daily lives. And with my show, Finding Your Own Damn Way, it's really about navigating some of the systems that we come in contact with, some of understanding some of the civics related to politics so that your decision making can be a little more clearer. And of course, we do the current events, and right now, the current events is the election. So that's what we're going to focus on today. We're going to focus on the fact that the election cycle is upon us, and we're going to talk about all things relevant to the election. And that's why I invited my guest Sasquatch to be part of the show today. I want to talk about her experience living with rural, remote, resource-driven communities and how they are the backbone of Canada. How this election is going to determine, what the financial future of those communities is going to look like. So Sasquatch, if you don't mind, do you go off camera, or are you always, or do you go on camera, or are you always off camera?
I can go on camera. I usually don't because I have really bad social anxiety and I typically smoke cigarettes, but I can put it out, and I had a little bit of an anxiety attack actually before, so I find that cigarettes are kind of my crutch, but I can go on camera if you would like me to.
Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Okay.
I just want to get a feel for where you're at.
Yeah.
I think people like to see people's
Yeah.
faces, right? And so you can just lean to the side and smoke. It's kind of one of our, how do we stay within the community guidelines
Yes.
on TikTok,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't care if you smoke or not. You can just pull it off to the side. But I will say that I have been listening to Sasquatch for the general people listening here. I've been listening to your conversation in quite a few lives. And it has always struck me that you are able to label. You are able to take the political and you're able to label it to your personal experiences, especially around employment. One of the big pieces of conversation that drew me in was let's just say, how you discussed incels. How you discussed incels, the rise of incels in our current political landscape, let's call it, our political nightmare, as these incels have sort of taken speed and have taken over and have influenced young men, which is a big voting base. And the Conservative Party has created a base of the Maple Megas, the Mini Megas, whatever you want to call them, but made a base of really frustrated, angry young men. And I just wanted to invite you to maybe make a couple of comments on that.
So I definitely, being somebody that is in the, blue collar and resource harvesting kind of sectors for work, I see a lot of these young guys, and a lot of them, they're either they speak like they you can tell they're parroting these conservative talking points, but I think politically they're very woefully undereducated and they're not really engaged. And when we're talking about young guys that might be out in the bush working with no cell service, they might be in camp, they're working long hours. I think that that's part of what we talk about in general with keeping the public so broken down and broke and busy and just trying to survive, that they can't engage politically and as meaningfully as they probably would like to if they really understood what was going on. And working with a lot of young First Nations guys, like I don't really get a lot of chance to sit and talk with people at work. And, the only time we ever have any social life, we sleep and work, and, we eat and shower and sleep and then go back to work. And you don't have a lot of time for political discourse. Right now I'm off snow removal, so it's wonderful. I've been able to be really active and been allowed into your space. So it's really difficult trying to engage these guys because they, like you say, they're angry and they're looking down the barrel of a lot of financial hopelessness. And for them, basically, we've seen it where, they're not so bad with women, I find, but I find that the racism towards immigrants, I think, is very rife in that demographic of young guys. And I see that in other spaces. It's not just in your blue collar spaces. I see that in general. And that is usually due to a lack of understanding how the immigration works and that the provinces have a part to play as well. And that they weren't brought here to hurt you. They were brought here to benefit corporations. And it's like, you're on the same team. They're broke, they're overworked, they're hopeless as well. The only difference is that you get to stay in Canada and have a future here, and their whole future is up in the air. So they've got 10 times more anxiety. So
Why do you think their anxiety is more important, let's say, than the next person's anxiety? Because I think that what you're speaking of here and what is affecting them, and I can't deny it, there's job insecurity, right?
Yep.
They have a lack of education, perhaps formal education, let's just say, even in their grade school. Sometimes working resource-driven jobs, you don't have to go to post-secondary education, but often, even in the grade school level, you're not getting a quality level of education per se.
Yep.
And I find that this happens with many people. So what differentiates them, do you think? What makes it so that they are so fucking aggressive when they can't figure the problem out? Right? Like, why? Because they're angry about their politics, right? They're angry about the immigrants. They're angry about the LGBTQ plus community. They're angry about so many things to the point where they go violent, verbally violent, absolutely. But we've seen them, to me, the occupation of Ottawa was a form of violence.
Yeah.
The shutting down the borders, a form of violence. Why is this group so susceptible to being those violent people? I don't. I mean, I'm not expecting like a psychologist answer here, but
I'm pretty well versed in psychology. But for me, I think that there's kind of two prongs to that, and I think that when you look at the blue collar industries right now, we are seeing diversity explode in those spaces, and I absolutely love it. Some of the comments I hear up here in Mackenzie, because we've got Duzcho and Chucho, so we've got native people running businesses up here for logging, for road building, and you'll hear the discourse that, oh, native people, they only hire their own, and I go, what do you think you've been doing for the last 100 years? Like, why do you think they had to make their own business to run businesses and work on their own land?
Do you see then the growth within the Indigenous community in the resource-driven rural remote areas? Do you see that as a real pushback response to having to fix what we were just talking about?
To be honest, I think they're just they're just good people that are good at doing business, and by having good business practice and doing a good job, and by employing, they do employ a ton of white people up here. I know they do. My neighbor works for Dustro, and he's very, very white. So I think that it's not necessarily like active pushback. I think it's a natural progression of eliminating this idea of DEI and you got hired because you're Indigenous or you're a woman or you're this. It's that this person is competent. These people are doing a good job. They have sound business practices and they're doing well. But seeing that, I think in the long run will be a cultural pushback to these ideas as we see. Like I was just watching Wab Canoe singing, Ashley Shingi's father requested Wab to sing, and he was singing, and all of the comments are, he makes me so proud to be Métis, and you see it, and I go, it's representation, or you see in the Disney movies, they have people of color playing parts. Is it done intentionally? I'm not sure, but I know in the long run, it will normalize it. And instead of it being a threat to people, the really younger generations, like early 20s and teens, are a lot less angry than you think. It's the guys in their late 20s, early 30s that are a little younger than me that are sort of in that place where they feel like they should have a wife, they should have a house, they should be moving up to supervisor, foreman in a position that's higher. And when they're meeting those roadblocks, that's where that anger comes in. The younger people, it'll be interesting to see as they get towards home ownership and hopefully things are better for them. That's like my friend Dirtman that joined, like, he's a First Nations person, right? Like, and he's not bigoted at all. Like, he comes from a logging family just like me. We're not bigoted. We're not angry at women and Indigenous and queer and trans people because we know how are they the ones with no power and they're so inferior, but they're wrecking everything. That doesn't make any sense. So there's almost
when you think about the area of the world you live in and the conservative stronghold that it is, this DEI conversation that infiltrates through the racist people, but yet, oh, I gotta make a puzzle here. Sorry. Oh, I gotta do a puzzle or then to shut my live down.
Oh, the little inactivity thing.
Yeah, I guess I better get active. What I celebrate, because I live in the same part of the world as you. Yep. And Zimmer is our MP, and he's been our MP, I think now, 3 times in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Conservatives do not like change. I think that's a fundamental thing we could say about conservatives. And yet all this change within our region has taken place despite the fact that conservatives have been in power politically. Mm-hmm. And I have this in my life, of course, and they are always complaining about the same issues. No representation in the North. The North's voice isn't loud enough, but they vote the same person
every time.
Repeatedly.
Every time.
Mm-hmm. What has Zimmer done that's so spectacular that has secured the North that they're not feeling so insecure that a group of incels doesn't rise up, or that this backlash of really angry base mini megas doesn't, bounce up? How I feel like they utilize this group to grow their numbers. Yep. And to me, that's that's a nefarious heart. That's a nefarious heart within their politics. And I would like to, I want to make a plug out to people right now because this is the election cycle, right? And there's a lot of people wondering what the heck they can do in your rural, northern, remote community where you don't think you have a voice because of the conservative stronghold. Yep. You don't have to go out door to door and knock. You can be a keyboard warrior right here on TikTok. You can change people's lives, and you can start just typing out. Go make yourself an account you can be have anonymity with, if you don't want to put yourself out there to be vulnerable. And I don't blame you if you don't, because you're going into an aggressive group. But being a keyboard warrior, pumping out some videos, you don't have to show yourself, but just vote Mark Carney or smartvote.ca, or websites where you can go to learn about how to vote. Learn about who your MP is.
Exactly.
So I want to put a plug out there because Beaver Politics is trying to get messaging out there so people can get involved in our elections. And I know in the part of the world that we come from, people feel very powerless. Yeah. People feel very powerless. Yep. If you do not belong to the conservatives, the apathy can keep people home. And that's what I really want to, highlight through stories like what you're saying here today. All this progressive community exists in the North, despite the rural, remote, resource-driven nature of our communities. Community takes care of itself, right?
Miss Radical saying, can you see a flag at the bottom? Look at the bottom of your chat box, she says.
Oh, I see a number 1. Mrs. Radical wants to come up.
There we go.
Hey, I love this live. I just wanted to point out on the bottom of the chat box, it's
Uh-huh.
like just above the star in the chat box, and there's a little flag, and it says, "Get info on Canadian federal election." So what
Yes.
I did is I tapped into it, and you can register to vote and all of
Oh,
these really cool things. It tells us the date and all, like, so
Ooh.
you both are having this great conversation, and I'm like, look at the bottom. It's so
there you're like, no, 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 look, look, look. That's amazing. It links
I
to
believe I
register.
premised the show with I'm not very good at looking at the bottom. Stay tuned. So
So
thank you.
I'm don't want to stop this conversation anymore. It's going really awesome. I'm going to dip out and continue to listen, but I really wanted you guys both have an opportunity to share that and see that.
Okay.
Very cool. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's a really great feature. I didn't even know that that existed.
And it
So
links to register to vote. It's not just information. That's pretty cool. I like that. I like that a
it's
lot.
a hyperlink they call it. Right? That's
Cool.
awesome. And also while we're here, I just want to plug the fact that the Beaver Politics show is always appreciative of any gifts to
Yep.
support the hosts and the work that we're doing, especially the emotional load that comes with talking about these kind of oppressive issues all the time can be can be quite a lot to manage. So we want to support our beavers the best way we can is show them love. Tapping is
And I was very emotional before this live. So, as somebody with borderline personality disorder, I find myself very
and
emotional and very heated. And I was like really concerned. I made a little trip to the smoke shop to calm myself. I made sure to have a very, nice calming time. And I was sitting there, talking with a friend about it and choking back tears because when we're talking about Bob Zimmer, that's not something I talk about a lot because I can feel tears welling up right now. This
yeah,
is a man that said missing and murdered Indigenous women should just stay on the res and get a job. This is the man that has been sitting representing us for 10 years. Sorry, 15 years. And not only is he incredibly, I find him racist and out of touch, he's also a misogynist. And his claim to fame is that he was, oh, I'm from Fort St. John and I, worked in Taylor and I was a welder's helper in the office. He didn't last long. Didn't last long. He went to teaching, which is great. We need that. And then he went back and owned a construction company and called that blue collar work when really he ran the construction company. How much blue collar work was he really doing? And for me, I hate the hypocrisy of these men that have not pulled days as long and hard as I have in the blue collar field, and they cosplay and they use it instead of it being like, hey, I represent all blue collar workers. First Nations women are one of the fastest growing demographics up here in the coal mines. Kanuma, they love Indigenous women. They are respectful. They show up and they work really, really, really hard. And they are so, so good to work with. They communicate. They take into consideration everyone around them. They go, hey, we're doing this. So and so said this earlier. Let's get them on the radio and check. Whereas the white guy's like, no, I'm doing it this way. We're going to plow it. And then we have to go back and fix it. And we're not supposed to build a landing here. And it's so frustrating that they could take that platform and instead of using it in that typical, hateful, narrow minded, conservative way, they could do so much good with it in that background because there are tons of hardworking First Nations women up here, tons of them, and women and First Nations people in general. And if they could actually do it the right way and include them, maybe the conservatives could go back to what they were and they, whatever, like I probably will never vote conservative, but if that's their aim and they really want to grow industry, why would you not work with the fastest growing demographic in the trades in your area? And that's a lot of his platform is he's Mr. Oh, he's like Pierre, oh, the liberals haven't done anything and the liberals are ruining this and the NDP and BC is ruining that. And we need to bring softwood lumber trade back. That's the only thing I agree with Zimmer. He hasn't done anything about it. He whines and he blames everybody. He hasn't done anything about it.
Zimmer conservative then fight against the conservative free trade agreement that they put in.
Thank you.
A little bit hard to deal with there. But I wanted to, if you don't mind, because you mentioned what Zimmer said, and that he lives in a part of the world where there is a strong presence of Indigenous communities.
Yeah.
This is what Zimmer stated. One of the major drivers of missing and murdered Aboriginal women is the lack of economic activity, or simply put, the lack of a job. Ultimately, when people have a job, they're not in despair. As if the disparity caused the fucking serial killer or the killer to do what they did to those women. And there isn't other things that are more of a driving force than an economic, like, we all have jobs. Does that mean we're all deep down serial killers that want to go out and murder women? How ridiculous to liken this serious of a situation to something that trivial, right?
It's to also tell them to get back on the res. Where are the financial and economic opportunities on the res for those women? Stay on the res, get a job. You push them onto reservations where they have no resources. They don't always have adequate shelter. They have terrible, terrible roads that beat the crap out of their cars. They might not have clean drinking water. Mm-hmm. And you push them out onto reservations with zero resources and zero representation, and then you tell them to get back on the res, stay home. He basically makes it sound like they're drunk and partying and walking along bush road. Like, when I heard that, like, the way I was, like, shaking and angry and crying, and I'm like, when I lived in Prince George as a teenager, we want to talk about employment and opportunity. I lived in Prince George, and I was a teenager when the scandal with Judge Ramsey happened.
I was involved in that too.
Two of my friends were twins, and they were 14, and they had so much generational trauma that they were in the foster system. They ended up out on the streets because they were abused so badly in their foster homes at 14 that the police took advantage of them in that situation. And what Judge Ramsey had good opportunities. The police had jobs.
It doesn't have
all white guys. All white guys. Yep, they all had good jobs. A judge is a very good job. So where does that come from? So we're going to blame young girls that are at such a disadvantage because of the rhetoric that you are speaking right now that continues to keep Indigenous people, especially Indigenous women, down to this day. They can't get health care. You're drunk. There was a woman, wasn't it in BC? They said she was drunk and she was in ketoacidosis. Right. She died. I have diabetes. I was stumbling and slurring. I had water on my brain. Nobody questioned me. I got let right in. I was in a room. Nobody questioned me.
Yeah, I've spent quite a few years working in doing medical social work. So, racism within our medical system is so huge, especially at the, when you see points of contact, like at emergency departments and things, and having to go and, sometimes in my jobs, I would just take the client and you'd advocate in that moment for that person, right? But just like nurses not believing, or you hear racist comments, or
they want pain meds.
Or, they're not going to give them the bed over the next person. And you really have to do some strong advocating for this. But the reality of the racism in rural, northern, remote areas is thick. It is just thick. And it's almost like deviants find a space to hide in rural, northern, remote areas. And I think that in terms of watching for predators, that women who live in these areas need to be more informed.
I talked to Cody Lebedjikoff on Plenty of Fish. Me and my sister talked to him, and he asked if I wanted to meet him for coffee. He was coming from Vanderhoof, and I said, I don't really know you, but we can talk if we get along. And great, if we get along, maybe we could go for coffee one day. I never agreed, never talked to him again. And this is before I had a cell phone. I come home one day to check my messages, and he was absolutely, you effing B, and you said you'd meet me. You're lucky you didn't meet me because you don't know how I would. Oh, Oh yeah, it was, and this was in
What?
2009, 10. Scary. And I mean, I'm a pretty educated person with a good support system. I just had come out of homelessness, but I had an okay support system that I was all right. Imagine if I was homeless and he offered me a place to sleep for the night. I want
How come our MP doesn't work on the violence towards women's issues at the human trafficking level, which is a rampant fucking problem in Prince George
huge up in
and
Prince George.
Mackenzie. Mackenzie's
Oh,
too.
we have all the time in Prince George. I don't see it on Facebook in Mackenzie. It's more talked about in person, but in Prince George, they mark the dirt or they scratch their car in certain places and it says like FV, female victim. And I saw one, I think the day before yesterday, and there was 3 other commenters that all said, yep, watch this part of Prince George. And that whole Connaught Hotel on 15th and Victoria has been closed down multiple times and bought out again because the human trafficking there will not stop. And we're not talking young women, we're talking children. They are children, and a lot of them are either disenfranchised women from rural areas, and a lot of them are Indigenous women too. And without that Greyhound bus, guess what they do? Their car breaks down. While I was driving on the res road and it beat the crap out of my car. My exhaust fell off. They pulled inspection on me. Now I can't drive. My buddy couldn't drive me, so they're hitchhiking to get that job to go in to do this.
Are you familiar with New Hope in Prince George, the society? I'm a founding member. I was an original member. Yeah. Yeah, I was name on the signature to get that place to be a nonprofit society. And so, one of the things they used to have on there was a bad date board, right? So that, because sometimes you get some pretty freaky guys coming through there. Right?
Oh yeah.
They want, specific requests, and so they would do a bad date, a bad John board kind of thing. And a lot of people don't understand that the sex trade work going on in our community, just how widespread it is.
Oh, and I lived on Queensway. I lived on Queensway for 6 years. Oh, absolutely. And you know what? Men are so angry because now women are online. They're in control. They're inside and they're safe. And men absolutely hate that women aren't standing outside at -40 at 2 in the morning and anyone could pick them up and grab them. And isn't that awful that men are angry about that? Or that now we have advocacy. We have support networks. Like you say, a bad date report. Hello, do you know how many women we could have saved on this planet had we, you could have done it on paper 100 years ago. They could have been doing that. The Green River Killer, they could have been doing that, and Vancouver, Willie Pickton, they could have been doing this. They've got all the time in the world to figure this out. And of course, leave it to women to figure it out in a small rural area with less resources and funding. And we're like, no, this is a serious problem. And I remember when I first moved to Queensway, it got better as like OnlyFans and social media took over more. There's less women standing out there. And that to me, like you almost want to just like you want to come stay at my house and like get warm. It's like it's so scary.
And learning how women would buy bottles of codeine cough syrup for the winter nights to be able to stay warm, to be able to stay on the streets in the winter. And I know with we want to talk about back to the election, back to the election cycle here. New Hope is a perfect example of how to take the political and make it personal, about how to put in place a service that's lacking in our political system, right? One of the things that New Hope did back in its early days was working with women who were victims of Pickton.
Yep.
Worked with victims from the Judge Ramsey. Now, a small world. Ramsey went to jail in Dorchester Penitentiary in New Brunswick. My cousin was his security guard.
No way! Small world.
Yeah, and when he was asking for clemency to come home when he had cancer, They were like, nope, yeah, and he ends up dying in prison, which was a good thing.
Yep.
But one of the things that spurred from all of that turmoil was there's a woman named Crystal Kapuscinski. She was a famous social worker here in Prince George.
Yep.
And she was a sex trade worker from downtown Eastside Vancouver, ex-heroin addict, founding member of the New Hope. She did sensitivity training with RCMP to better engage with sex trade workers for their own safety and the safety of the community. And she won the Governor General's Award for doing that work. So just because we're in a small community, just because we're considered North, think of your power within your system, right? Think of the power within the system around you, because change can occur.
And I will go ahead and put myself out there a little bit. I do online sex work too. So to me, when I hear that term, when you see that meme, we respect all boots in this house, I'm like, yes, we do. Like, and if people knew that when you're doing that online, that's taxable income. That's taxable income. So if they wanted to talk smack about that, I'm like, if they knew, and I won't out any of them, how many blue collar women I know here, Alberta, a few in Ontario, and down in the States that work a full-time blue collar job and do that on the side. And also some people that have more either disability or childcare issues and they do sex work to support themselves. That's taxable income.
Mm-hmm.
And if that woman can do that in a space where she is creative, it's on her terms, and she is safe and inside, and she can profit off that and pay taxes into the system, why aren't we normalizing that?
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%.
Don't support.
Now, and this is when I like to bring up other people into the show. Want to try to do a bit of a debate style. I know we don't have very many people in the room. But apparently, if you do a debate style, that's supposed to bring the numbers in. So we're going to give it a go. If anybody wants to come up and join the conversation, add to the conversation, or ask questions about some of the things that we've brought up, we welcome any kind of conversation. Hi, Lori. Thanks for joining the live. I just, I really appreciate... I know that the majority of Canadians live in like 3 spots, right? The Toronto area, the Vancouver area, well, basically 2 spots, right? Toronto, Vancouver is where all the population is. But our rural, remote areas are important to be protected. And when you live in a space, you tend to protect the area around you, right?
Yes.
And I think that's where hopefully Indigenous people are going to save our environment, right? Oh. This is where they're at.
And what's funny too is that sitting here in Mackenzie, this little area used to produce over 40% of the taxable income for this province. And another friend of mine that started out in engineering and then they moved away from that, they said that a lot of the income that is in the Lower Mainland are like Site C down. It's engineering firms that are down in Vancouver, but the projects are all up in the north, the pipelines, the dams, all of these things. And that a lot of that income that they count down there comes from let's be real, in BC, it's built on logging, mills, mining too. Like BC is built on logging, and to not protect that and not to kind of respect and represent that is crazy to me, because I don't think a guy that's maybe in politics and maybe whatever they've done for their career beforehand is going to grasp from logging to logging truck drivers to heavy duty mechanics to the graders that grade the road to soft filers to your millwrights to your safety people that go and watch and do spark watch, your welders, the office workers. It's absolutely endless how many well-paying jobs are tied to that logging sector. And here's Zimmer running his mouth, and like you've even got like Rustad in there. It's like, well, then what are you guys doing about it?
What the hell is Rustad?
I don't see them on a federal or provincial level having any discussion about it. They'll whine on their website. Then go out and represent your constituents and go and represent yourself on a conservative level and get something done, because I don't see it anywhere. I never seen them out talking to Trudeau and getting the softwood trade. Like, where are you?
Well, you must know. Well, for me, to me, the conservative voice is muffled under Tiny Trump, right? So I don't know that Zimmer or any of the other representatives have that freedom that they're screaming about because their own leader is, putting a couple. I understand that you need to stay in line with the message, but I don't see these guys stepping in line with messaging. I don't see them with messaging.
Trudeau bad. Carney's corrupt. Carney's a billionaire. All his assets. It's the same, not correct garbage, just in a dryer. It's like putting a garbage bag in a dryer and turning it on. It's like, it stinks and it's messy and it's like, why? Why are we doing this? This is our politics now? Like...
So, Zimmer, okay, so I'm in Prince George. I'm in the northern side of the river. You're in Mackenzie. You have to vote for somebody 4 hours north of you. I have to vote for somebody 5 hours north of me.
Yep.
Somebody that I never hear and never see. I know there's an office here, but I don't have no big general presence being me.
No.
And I know that's the same for, and maybe they go to Chetwynd. I don't know. But it seems Fort St. John, Dawson Creek, Chetwynd are the only, and Fort Nelson, they'll bounce back and forth.
Yeah.
But they go back screaming about jobs when the reality is this. Site C Jam was built in Fort St. John. There are other bridges, like the bridge that was fixed in Chetwynd when they had the flood that was taken out. That was only a few years back.
Yep.
They have all this resource development. They still have the gas industry. The gas industry is thriving up there. Up there, right? The fracking is still going on. So what is he, the way that they can manipulate the conversation about a lack of resources up there, it's astounding. Because
they don't care about the logging in Prince George and Mackenzie or Vanderhoof. They don't care about that. They haven't done anything. They whine and whine and whine. Well, you have oil and gas. We don't have that in Prince George and Mackenzie. We don't have that to fall back on.
I love your mayor. I love the mayor in Mackenzie.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So you feel her womanness impacts her ability to do the northern rural remote work as a politician.
So the thing about Mackenzie is right now we're having a lot of the main issues that you see brought up here are going to be your standard issues that people whine about because it's an aging population, a lot of boomers, a lot of Gen X, a lot of people retired or just on the verge of retiring or semi-retired. And it's the same talking points that you really see brought up here. You see property taxes are going up and snow removal is no good. Why are we focusing on beautification of the city? Now, to be honest, I think that the one thing that's been done that I like is they built a little BMX track and then we'll have concerts and stuff put on. And then we'll have people come from other areas and come to the rec center here is awesome. Like certain things that are run here a certain way, I really, really like. My thing is that you do have to consider the boomer population here. And I don't see much talk on what's going to happen as the last few jobs dry up. These seniors are going to pass away. Now, no one's going to buy or rent these homes. What is going to happen to them and their property taxes? Because the snow removal here is really good. If we have, we had an issue with our fire hydrant. There was a guy from the district that day. He came that day. It was, I like go up for a cigarette. Hi, he's right there. So what I don't see is how we're going to keep the standard of living up. Whoa. Don't mute yourself, guys.
Can get the mics under control.
So what I'm worried about is that, do I think that the boomer population here is very hesitant to let people in? And as someone that lives here, I'm going back and I was working at Rock Tech to plow snow. I was driving back to Prince George to plow snow in a loader. And like even the dump here, it's a 908M mini loader. I have 10,000 hours in just that model of loader. The second question in my interview, how long have you lived here? I said 2 years. Oh. And that was pretty, you could tell. So have they done it to themselves? Yes. but we're going to have to figure out, as people pass away, and these homes, they'll sell for 5-10 years, people will see the cheap houses, but people cannot get jobs here, and especially if you're new, you cannot get jobs here. My neighbor that's at Does his girlfriend's son is 17, really hardworking kid. He's never cycled a glow plug in a diesel pickup. They're offering him to run skidder. I'm like, I've literally run skidder. I had a logging business run out of my parents' house for 30 years. Could you get me a job? No. Well, I've been looking after his.
So there's a lot more going on in the community than, like, the jobs are necessary. You're talking about jobs being available, but there's some, let's say, prejudices, and I don't mean that in the sense of racism. I mean prejudices related to what they see as a foundation to their community members and how they want to control that, and it makes it difficult for the younger people then to populate. How does okay? I'm going to talk to you forever in a long time, but I'm going to go ask Pasty Native and Dirtman to give us some conversation here. So Pasty Native, you were up first. Do you want to add anything to the conversation?
It's interesting because, like, a lot of what you guys are saying, I see a lot in northern communities too, in Ontario specifically.
Yep.
And it's a lot of the same problems, and mainly conservative driven, and they fear progressive change. It's not even that they hate it or they don't like it. They fear it because they don't understand it. Which is same thing when it comes to homophobia and racism. A lot of the times they're scared. It's not that they hate, because you have to know someone in order to be able to hate.
Ooh. Can I say hi?
No, not right now.
Oh,
please.
I want to say hi.
Oh, Pasty Native and the children. The question I have is, in Northern Ontario, is there this kind of cycle like we have here in Northern British Columbia of, electing the same Conservative 3-4 terms in a row? I mean, that ends up being 12, 15 years of no resolution to the problems that get repeated, every election cycle. Do you guys shift your Conservatives?
Oh, he must be dealing with
Sorry, had to get the little one out of the room. He wanted to say hi. But yeah, I'm happy because Northern Ontario seems to be turning more towards NDP in recent years, which is awesome, but it also kind of sucks because it's not a very heavily populated area of Ontario, so it doesn't do much when it comes to provincial elections.
But federally,
Federally, I know my hometown was mainly Liberal, at least the last few times, because they were over the Conservative leadership, but a lot of the Liberal leadership up there was very much similar to the Conservative Party.
I think that's a big party, right? Like, the Liberals, a lot of Liberals see him as very right-leaning Liberal, left-leaning Conservative. I've heard that conversation out there. So I mean, so it sounds like that at least, though, that your area is at a point where it's going to at least try different solutions, because that's not a reality for our neck of the woods, unfortunately. It's just not. When we go to smartvoting.ca, so there's a plug for smartvoting.ca. Down below here, above where the guests come up and where gifts can be given and shared, we have a hyperlink to the Canadian federal election where you can actually go to make sure that you're registered for the election. I lost my train of thought. Well, all I want to, I'll just get back to, we want to encourage people to actually do something that'll take a proactive step towards participating in the election. And some of the ideas are creating a link right here. And then having conversations like this that is going to give people maybe a little bit of hope that their region they can make a shift in their region. And even though we are heavily conservatively driven, the shift is never going to take place unless we initiate that. May not be this election, but maybe we make a voice for the next election. Smartvoting.ca is where you can make a decision about strategic voting. In our area, blue is a great big column, right? Because it's 60-70% conservative. And then red and orange are kind of even Steven, so to speak, on the playing field. And making a strategic vote between Liberal and NDP will not influence what happens to the big blue tower.
Yeah.
However, it does register that left-leaning people exist. And when you look at our writing, you can see that, if those voices had been united under one strategic vote, they could have taken the Conservatives down.
Yep.
But I think if you go to smartvoting.com, you're going to get and just type in your writing. It's as simple as putting your postal code in, I believe. You're going to be able to make some decisions about whether or not your vote can be strategic or not, because it's not always applicable. Our writing is not necessarily applicable.
I know. Yeah.
But technically, it sounds like yours would be. Right now, I want to invite Dirtman into the conversation. Thank you for waiting patiently.
Hello.
Support of the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Well, I don't really have much to say because when I met Sasquatch, she's been explaining more politics to me, and I've been learning more through Sasquatch and stuff. So I don't really have much to put onto that. But she's been informing me a lot of how everything has been going on with, PP and like all of this. And it's kind of opening my eyes now as a younger person because I'm 21.
Okay.
And I never really expected this much of this stuff would matter, right? Because I'm young, but now that I'm seeing this and how this is changing, how communities are changing and everything now, I realize it does make a difference when younger people do get into it.
Yeah, 100%. Congratulations. Good job, Sasquatch. Because people, the whole point on this talk, the whole point of being in politics is for people to be able to speak with their own voices, because your voice matters. And just because we don't wear a suit doesn't mean that we don't know what's going on.
And Dirtman, if you want to share too, there's a couple demographics that you belong to that are heavily threatened by conservatives, if you are comfortable sharing that.
Yeah. So I recently came out of the closet as bisexual.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's another thing I've been learning about myself, and then realizing this community is now under attack that I'm comfortable within and I came out as. Now realizing that all of this is getting threatened because how certain parties don't view it as a proper thing, and I feel like I'm messing up my wording a little bit.
Well, you've done good. I'm understanding.
Yeah. So I've been learning that, and I have a lot of other friends in the LGBTQ plus community that are in the States that are also facing this problem, and it's and I'm realizing it's way worse down there than it is, but it's getting worse here now too. My one friend, he was going on a trip, and some old white man basically told him to go back to his own country. Never said a word. My friend never said a word to him. Nothing. And he's in Canada. He was going on a trip, just minding his own business, waiting for the train. Mm-hmm. And some old prejudiced white man told him to go back to his own country. Nothing.
I think that the old white man, as you describe him, has been given a privilege card the last 4 years, especially 5 years, to be able to behave that way out in public. What used to be slithered under a rock has now been lifted and given daylight savings time.
It's almost turned from shop locker room shop talk to where these young guys, and I don't know, because Dirtman, you're younger than me, but you're not always in the same industries as me, but I mean, you're around a lot of blue collar people too.
Yeah.
Is that these young guys they saw their dads do it in secret. They're drinking at the fire, they're at the shop, and young guys think that's cool. And they almost parrot it like it's sports team, or I'm in oil and gas too, or I was a logger, and they wear it as a badge of identity. And I don't know how much you really see that, because you're in a lot of safe online spaces, which is good. You're in healthy spaces, which is good for you and good for them. But I mean, when young guys say it, I don't think they realize the implication that it has, that like this can affect your life, that there's women seeing this, that there's indigenous, that there are queer and trans people seeing you say this. And to them, it's almost like being cool. But I don't think they're keeping up with that. A lot of the young guys are like you. They're progressive and they are deep down when you talk to them. Because you and me even joked. Remember the one time you made a joke, oh, you blue haired liberal. And I start talking with you, you're like, oh, wait, ew, that's what conservatives are about? I'm like, yeah, they're terrible. Like, you're not conservative. I promise. Don't
Like
talk
that-
about yourself that way.
Like, so this was like how I met Sasquatch. She was, I can't remember. Me and her were talking back and forth, just like sending like crappy TikTok memes back. And I was bored one day, and I'm like, I've been talking to her long enough. Let's shoot the shit. And then like I found out she's really cool in that. And then it just like, how long have we been talking for now? Almost 6
When that last turnaround, when I was staying at Esther's Inn in Prince George, and I was applying, that was January was when I stayed at Esther's Inn, I would say.
Yeah, so about I'm shit with numbers.
4 months ish now.
Yeah.
3.5 months.
And I've learned through meeting Sasquatch, I've learned a lot more about politics now than I ever would.
Well, and where you're at, so being on the res too, like a lot of Native people don't engage, they don't call the cops, and they don't engage in politics because all they see, like we're talking about Judge Ramsey, they see a system that and like the way that Zimmer talks, the way Pierre talks, they see a system that does not accept them, does not respect them, does not have any of their best interests in mind, is not going to listen. And if they try and come to the table with real issues, they're going to be brushed inside and told that they're unemployed, go back to the res. And it's going to be really hard to break that barrier because there are some very sharp, very progressive, really, really incredible young Indigenous people in this country. And I'm glad they're watching Wob Canoe right now. That makes me so happy. You see so many kids are like, I am so proud to be Métis, so proud to be First Nations. And they feel like they have a voice now. And if we can make them feel like they belong in politics, which they do, which Dirtman, there's not a lot of politics talk in your house. There's talk of your culture, like you talk with your grandma about being Métis, and that's great and everything. But we need to get you guys into politics and voting so that you don't have any pushback or anyone trying to diminish your culture at a legislative level, because there was a time where you couldn't speak your language. You couldn't, it's crazy. And it wasn't that long ago in this province that there was still residential schools. That's terrifying.
Yeah, I can say something because I was talking to someone about this in a live earlier. We were talking about residential schools, and they're like, "Oh yeah, like," and I was cooking, and I was like, I heard something about it. I'm like, they're like, "Oh yeah, I can't remember." I was like, the last residential school closed in Canada was 1997.
Mm-hmm. That was up.
Yeah, and then I was like, I was explaining to them about the book because I don't know if you knew, like I'm from Quesnel. I don't know if you knew like what our mayor did, like his wife did, but she went around basically carrying this book saying like the residential schools were a hoax and like all of this and that and that and that, and just basically made a big A of herself. But it hurt so many people, like in our native community. It hurt so many people to see that she would try to say this did not happen to us. When I can't remember what was the closest grave found to us. Sasquatch, you might know more than me.
The closest.
Yeah. To like.
Well, I know down in Williams Lake was where the big 200 and some, but don't tell, it places like LeJac, which is very close to the Prince George. I mean, they ran that school for 100 years.
Yeah.
Shut down in 1997. They had the day school stuff associated with it. I won't be surprised if they're going to find graves at that school.
And the way they treat it. Look at Fort George now. It's CK Dene, or what they changed the name of it now, kind of as I moved away. But not only is there already grave sites that people can walk through like it's a tourist trap.
Last day's
When
school.
when they dug that new gazebo, they found more graves. They kept digging. They kept digging. They continued the project, and there are a million spots. They could go and flatten out a bunch of, Cottonwood Island a little bit higher up from where it floods. There are so many spots they could build. There's parts when you go up more towards the bridge, the B Surfside Bridge. Why couldn't they move that part? You know why? Because it's up a little higher from the water table and it's not going to flood as much. That's the only reason that they kept that spot. And they just kept digging. So their solution is we're going to change the name to a native name. It's like that doesn't change the fact that we continue to dig up graves of human
Yeah.
beings. It's clearly a sacred spot to First Nations people there, and they didn't care.
I want to say something positive about the First Nations, about Indigenous people in our area, because the strength that they have shown, but their business astuteness. They have agencies like PIGNATA, the Prince George Native Aboriginal Training Association,
They're awesome. Yep.
right?
Yep.
So they have employment programs.
Yep.
They have bridging to employment through Carrier Security. They have a huge amount of resources, and I know Cornell as well has a lot of resources within the community. The problem, I think, is sometimes connecting the person to the resource.
The Native Friendship Center is really good for that. Actually, I'm so lucky. I grew up with Mary Clifford as my auntie, and she helped found the. Oh, I'm so lucky you don't even. I was just talking with her this morning. I go, I got to talk about Bob Zimmer today. Wish me luck. I'm gonna try and keep it not too spicy. Oh yeah, I know. So, the Native Prince George Native Friendship Center. When I went back to heavy equipment school and logging shut down, there was, I would say, 8 young men and women that were all brought there through different programs. It could be PIGNATA. I'm not sure where, but through the Native Friendship Center, our bus would pick them up there and take us out to the old Mud River dump where the O'Brien School is. And that Native Friendship Center, they'll pull teeth. Like I just took a friend in the summer to pull teeth. The amount of resources, and there's so many different programs there, and that Native Friendship Center, I hope it never closes, because the amount of, when I hear people talk about it, like as a kid, I understood Prince George Native Friendship Center. I know where it is. Yeah, like we've gone there, but it doesn't dawn on you how many resources that they are a hub for people like if you've got supervised visits with your kids, you've got dealing with rural nations like Fort Ware, and like it starts to dawn on you how much that
For children, a friendly start. It's called
Yep.
Start Something, for young children.
Yep.
The thing I want, because this is the election cycle, is like, how do we get people to understand, like Indigenous people are 5 or 6% of the population, but elections are won and lost on 100 votes sometimes.
Exactly.
And so trying to get, the population that you guys are connected to through the resources that you guys have accessed, right? So you're aware of the Friendship Center, PIGNATA, you're aware of maybe the Aboriginal Business Development Center. These are places you can find money to overcome your employment, right? And to overcome your income oppression by the colonial system. They fight back against that. But what I don't see is a lot of active politicking. How to ensure your population is registered to vote.
Absolutely. It's not existent.
If it's there, then I would welcome the conversation to hear about it. But I don't see that out there, and I just in identifying a gap. There's a lot of people that could be reached, but their hands can be tied to the funding.
Well, and the funding is already lacking because we're in the north, and then you tack on Indigenous onto that, and then it's like the people down in the coast where the money and funding is, they already don't care about the north. They're starting to see us as almost a net negative as logging goes down. That it's kind of like, if you're in Prince George, that like Fort St. John and here as the mills close, RERs aren't open all the time.
Mhm.
So, oh, go ahead, Dirtman.
Speaking of the logging, I was gonna comment this before I got pulled up. Literally, like going back like 8 years, I remember seeing like anywhere you could barely drive through my town without seeing a logging truck. Now nowadays, you're lucky to maybe see like four going to the mills with a load of logs, maybe five if it's a good day.
That's incredible. I remember being in that community and just being overwhelmed because the roads aren't very big. Being overwhelmed with the amount of semis and logs and you worry about them falling on you when you're driving beside them.
Final destination moment.
It's Fort St. James that the logging trucks are jammed and jammed.
Oh, baby. Oh, it's still alive and well. A lot of my friends, because it's colder up here, all my buddies from Fort St. James, I'm looking, I'm like, And I'm like, oh, I go, are you shut down? Yeah. I go, you're in my neck of the woods. I'm like, I know that road. And so that it's busy out there. If they're all on pretty much breakup now, but man, oh yeah, that direction outside of PG, they are hopping. They are go, 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 which, you know what, for Fort St. James, I think it's so important to keep that open for them and to keep that employment there because that is a little rural native community that is really quite thriving.
And they
Like,
just bought a hospital,
and they deserve it because they're bringing in a lot of taxes.
right? Thank you, NDP.
They,
So,
as I was arguing with people in Ontario about blah 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 BC wait times are terrible. I'm like, my dad slipped and fell on Sunday and he had knee surgery on Tuesday. We just got a bunch of new medication covered. I'm like, no, NDP is far superior to conservatives for provincial healthcare. And it's people in Ontario. I'm like, don't complain. Sorry if you didn't get out and vote or you voted conservative. Don't complain. And then it's like, no, we're doing much better under NDP. Thank you. Much better.
and it could be a reflection for, our federal election because it's under the NDP that our healthcare system is stabilizing. No matter
Yes.
how disruptive it looks,
Housing too. Yep.
better than what's going on across Canada, and so is the housing. I would agree with that. Housing's another big bone of contention for this election, but I can tell you this: Canada is not broken, right?
No.
Broken.
No.
Lots of industry happening. There's lots of good development going on, and I think that that slogan is blowing up in their face right now. Blowing up in their face. How
And
does someone like Zimmer say Fort St. John is broken? How do they go out there
They're
with a
screaming it.
and
They're
do
absolutely freaking. You know why? Because one mill shut down, and he really does hammer home the whole softwood trade agreement. And like I said, I agree with him. We do. It's been since 2016 it expired. My dad lost his logging show. Close Cut operated out of Prince George. He started in 1997. We did compass work. Like we'd be on the little quad with the little GPS, zapping the little piece of metal and climbing and putting up flagging tape and spray painting out blocks and stuff. Up to we had when I was running for him, we had equipment. We were full on logging, loading trucks, and he lost everything in 2019. And he is not the only one, or they're moving to Alberta. And we do need to do something about it. But what is Zimmer doing? He's sitting crying about it in Fort St. John, talking to all these guys, and mining is also alive and well. Kanuma just opened another mine. Milligan is getting some kind of funding subsidy. Something was I didn't read it all. I seen it on TikTok and it refreshed it. Milligan's getting some kind of funding, and you can
Yes.
absolutely go to Milligan from Fort St. John. It's not that far of a drive if you're going.
look at companies like Finning Canada. There's a reason they employ a lot of people.
I was gonna say.
You're wearing the colors,
I would love to work for Finning one day. My only thing is that they were sending bulldozers over to Palestine.
Yeah, well,
So that's a little embarrassing, but I will say that the thing with Tiger Cat, because Tiger Cat's Canadian and Tiger Cat is very popular. Cat's still good. Komatsu's okay. People love their John Deere. People love their Tiger Cat. I follow a lot of loggers down in the States. They're gonna have tariffs like a 25% tariff on a $200,000 machine.
yeah.
The payments are going to go up $1,000, $2,000 a month. They're going to go from 7-8 grand to 10 grand USD a month, right? So I
We
don't
talk about the automotive industry. There's a lot of conversation. I listened to Mark Carney and his conversation today. I was glad to hear it. He had that official conversation with Trump, and like he said, Trump reached out to him. It wasn't the other way around. But places like Finney, places like CAT,
Yep.
that they build those machines in the United States. They actually make, they come together there. I know it's piecemealed and all that, but there's a big factory down in the United States that feels that heavy equipment industry and mining and places, Fort Mac, all those big equipment places.
Yep.
This tariff is really going to hit that hard as well.
Here they are, everyone's talking about, like, they're all trying to cosplay as blue collar people. Even Trump tries to appeal to them. I'm like, look what he's going to do to your industry. If you're in logging, Trump screwed you. If you're in oil and gas, these tariffs are going to hurt you. They're going to hurt you on either side of the border. If you run any kind of heavy equipment in the States, your fuel prices have skyrocketed. The way that you're manufacturing and your parts for repair, because I know new equipment, it's hot boo-boo garbage. It's falling apart after 2,000, 5,000 hours. It's going to really disrupt, and downtime, if you're a contractor, downtime is your killer. It's not that, I had to pay 10 grand for this hydraulic pump. It's that I was down for 2 weeks waiting for it. You could lose 30, 40 grand in that time.
Exactly.
And the thing is that we'll see what Carney does. If Carney can really start to turn the tide for industry and very clearly state, he doesn't have to smear, he doesn't have to talk crap on the conservatives, but he can clearly state liberals are not taking your jobs. Liberals do not hate oil and gas. Liberals do not hate the logging industry. Liberals are doing it in a way that is socially conscious. We work with Indigenous people, and we're doing it in a sustainable way, not to get your vote so that you have a job in 20 years in your industry, and we have somewhere to send the wood, the oil, the lumber, the whatever we're sending, the zinc, the copper, the gold, the coal, whatever, steel, whatever we're sending. If he can really latch onto that blue collar vote, I think Carney could really change a lot of minds. If he can get all of these, damn liberals and Trudeau, and they're going to shut down my pipeline. It's like, no, actually they're normal. Trudeau helped build that pipeline. I'm up in Mackenzie. They just twinned it.
Yeah.
No poo-poo. Honey, I work blue collar up in northern BC. The Liberals absolutely did not stop a pipeline. They built and twinned it. No, they didn't, boo-boo. Nope. Sorry, that's not real. It didn't happen. And
on here.
someone in the chat. And by the way, Carney's talking about building a pipeline all the way from Western Canada and building one to the East Coast to diversify our trade, so we're not locked into bad prices with the States and we can have a better market to sell our goods on.
And why wasn't there a pipeline across Canada to begin with? And they're sort of
conservatives.
It just took a little dip into the United States, right? And listen, I forget, it was the conservatives with the free trade agreement, and they want to complain about the problem, but they don't look at the fact that they created the problem themselves. And I think that's an important piece of the conversation. I know history, it is bringing up ancient history, but the bottom line is those contracts didn't evolve to the point that we're not having this dispute today, right? And so whatever got updated in 2017, whatever got updated by Trump himself, it doesn't matter. Trump's got an agenda that has nothing to do with the validity of that agreement. That agreement stands for itself, and it doesn't matter. It could have been written in gold, and Trump would still be tossing it right now because he wants to shift the power of the economy for the United States, right?
Well, and the thing is that in the long run for the States, what they are doing, whether today or for Trump's, term or for however long, okay, maybe he secures some jobs in the States. It's not going to happen that way. There is a steel company that makes steel No, sorry, it was aluminum, sorry. And they are an American company that operates in Canada and sells back to the States. And now they won't even sell to their country of origin because of the tariffs. You see how convoluted and backwards and stupid that is? Your own company can't sell to itself where it was getting a good deal because you're buying aluminum from Canada. There's a reason why you do that. It's because you get a good deal. And now they can't even sell to themselves. It's going to go off. I want to say it was going to go to China maybe instead, or maybe it's staying in Canada. I'm not sure, but it's not going back to themselves. So in the long run, we're going to have Carney, who is not only is he financially literate, he is also diplomatic and calm. He does not engage in smearing. He does not engage with Trump. He is showing to have a lot of that kind of Barack Obama, graceful, articulate, calm, level-headed, which is what we need. And he's riding on the back of Trudeau's diplomacy. We have such, and then he has that industrialized carbon tax now. We are in such a good position to diversify trade. Europe and Australia are chomping at the bit to trade with us. And then you look at Finland, and Trump goes, hey, we need help with eggs. They said, no,
That's not
no,
good.
we're good. But
They're-
right now, as they're talking about the substance problem that's all from Canada,
Right.
there's more eggs being shifted across the border illegally than opioids. and it's all Canada's fault, and that's the problem. And it's like it's the problem of people that I don't understand how they don't have like some kind of like industry committees where like you've got a guy that comes from steel, aluminum, mining. You have all like committees on these industries that are experts. They have to be almost elected in a pool of people in that industry should almost elect them. You know what I mean? Or they should consult. You know what I mean? And then talk to
I think
them.
that's happening. I think that's happening. I think that, like, we have our main players. We have Jolie. We have the main big players from the ministry at the federal level, but they can't do all that work. They have to be informed by industry. There has to be some people sitting in subcommittees to move this forward, and they're the ones that are really doing the negotiating. Not Trump. He wouldn't know the first thing. Back in the late 80s, when the free trade agreement was conversation and not a reality, back when we were on the left here trying to fight against it because we knew we needed to solidify domestically before we opened up to the international markets, and that this agreement was not protecting us. What we're living today was identified as a problem with the agreement. And so for years and years, you were just hoping that somebody was going to work on the worst case scenario. So when this happened, we'd be prepared. And quite frankly, if it's got to happen now, thankfully with a progressive government. Now, I lean very far to the left.
Yeah.
I have no representation in terms of political party here in
No.
Canada.
NDP's closest, a little dash of green and some liberal issues, but it's at all too centrist.
Yes, I'm finding my own damn way myself politically because I don't have representation.
That's right.
To speak
What were you
there.
saying, Dirtman?
I don't know if you've seen this, but did you see what they tried to do with Sesame Street down there?
Sesame Street.
What?
Literally, it's such a joke. They're literally asking, because Elmo's red, right?
Yeah.
They're asking if he's Democrat or if he was ever one. And then
Red's Republican.
Red would be Republican.
Yeah, like Sasquatch said, I fucked them up a lot.
Oh, maybe Cookie Monster.
Grover. Grover's blue.
Grover's the blue one. That's right.
No, so they're like all of this, and they're like deport Elmo. Like it's just a whole like joke down there. Like
the thing for you, Dirtman, and I try and talk to you a lot about this. A lot of the things that you watch politically are these sort of rage bait.
Well, I know it's rage bait. No, I was talking to someone about this in a live.
For sure, I'm just saying, why are you even wasting your time talking about that? Because that's a distraction from stuff that could get you like talking about softwood trade agreements. You come from a logging family. You could be talking about real issues, but you're distracted by even how they use trans and gay agenda as a distraction. Oh, the women, whatever, women's agendas and stuff like this, women's rights. A lot of these things are thrown at you, so you have to spend time wiping them off your face to get to the real issues. and I bug you about this, and I know I'm mean, and I'm sorry I'm doing it in the live. Don't engage with that shit. It's a distraction. It's a waste of your time.
Well,
and
it is a waste of
using
time.
your brain to
I
look
just-
at real
I
issues.
would like to have Normal come up into the conversation. You think
Yeah, do it.
and
I'll mute myself if I have to. Yeah.
want to come up into the conversation? Can you send a request in?
This might get spicy if they join.
It's a. I don't think they're open to the invitation. I'm not getting the.
Yeah, no.
They never are. They talk a lot in the comments, but they never come up because they can't.
Yeah, when they say the liberals shut down the pipelines, do you know it was liberals and conservatives that worked together to create the whole pipeline system that we currently have?
Yeah.
And it was liberals and
I wouldn't have known that.
worked together to create Petro-Canada. And it started out as a way, you know, Canada would have been just fine if the conservatives hadn't torn apart Petro-Canada and started tearing apart our domestic, energy system that we could rely on.
Well, look at we were talking about this in Radicals Live, how some countries are set up for life because they did not privatize and sell off their energy sectors. Were we talking about Finland, maybe somewhere in Northern Europe, and they're set for life.
Yeah,
They held on to it.
Anybody that in Venezuela, you know, you talk about what the United States did to Venezuela to try and destabilize so they can have control over the oil. You know, it's just ridiculous stories. But Canada is not going to succumb to what the United States is doing. The world is awoke to what the United States is doing, and Oz, we called it the Five Eyes, right? But we dropped the United States, but Australia, United Kingdom, France, all working together to have to combat the imperialistic takeover that Trump is attempting with Greenland, the Panama Canal, and Canada. What a shit show.
And I can't imagine why anyone that talks about one fiscal conservatism looks at Trump because he's been bankrupt 6 times, even though he got $300 or $30 million in the 80s. That's like $200 million now. And then there's blue collar workers, farmers, again this term voted for him. Like, that man has ripped off contractors for decades. He ripped off Andy Warhol, was commissioned to paint in the Trump Towers. He ripped off Andy Warhol. Like, how are you? He ripped off an artist that was commissioned to do a painting, and he ripped off contractors that built all of his little empires, which most of them have failed and gone bankrupt now. How are people voting for this guy in Canada First? And like, you look at Pierre, and it's like he's part of the team that sold off and basically privatized everything that would have made this country incredibly rich for generations to come. And what are they doing now? They're still selling out to corporations. To this day, they're all in bed with lobbyists. Half of their teams are lobbyists. Look at Danny.
Yeah. Danielle Smith today is down doing her interview with Ben Shapiro.
Wow.
Shapiro.
That's good. Yeah, as a blue collar woman that's going to go to Alberta and work in oil and gas. Yeah, talk to Ben Shapiro that thinks that like women are baby makers and doesn't understand our anatomy and would probably, you know, is pro-life. Yeah, sweetheart, then you can come out here, Ben Shapiro, who's never worn a pair of steel toes. Come see what a man is, honey.
Why do you
Come
think
out into oil and gas and work those big boy jobs. Because these podcast guys, they probably don't know how to use a power drill. They couldn't pull start a sled or a lawnmower. They couldn't use a chainsaw. They have never cycled glow plugs on a diesel pickup truck, and they want to talk about a man? Come meet one. I'll show you one.
Yeah.
I'll show you one.
You know, when we look at someone like Danielle Smith and how well she's being sort of received into those far right-wing circles, part of why she's well received is she's the perfect conservative woman. She wears her skirt below the knees. She doesn't wear it too tight. She wears just enough makeup. She's very calm. She has a demeanor, like they like their women in a certain way, right?
But she used to stand at the podium and sob her eyes out because gay people's rights were being infringed on. There was a time where that woman went to bat for gay people. Now look at her talking to Ben Shapiro. And she's changed her. And honey, you changed your name. Miss Danielle. You changed your name. So the hypocrisy, but again, as long as you, the whole thing about, the whole thing about conservatives and Republicans is it's this, and even, I'm sorry, in Christianity, this fake image. Look at Dennis Rader, deacon of his church. All right, married, husband, business owner. Look what he did while a little girl hung from a pipe. But he can take my kids out to the bush.
I think, when we start looking at
Nuts.
Tiny Trump and you start tearing apart all of his scandals and you start tearing apart all of his nefarious ways, he lays pretty, he's got a lot to be bared, right? He actually has investments. You want to talk about the hypocrisy? Tiny Trump, it turns out, has investments in the company that Mark Carney is. Mark Carney put one of his companies into a trust that's now being overseen by a legislative government system.
Yep.
And Tiny Trump invested in that company, right? He's got investments in the company, and he's trying to say it's a nefarious company. They talk
and talking and endorsing all of these incorrect statements about how, he was, advising Trudeau financially, and he and the Liberals ran us into the ground. Then why are you investing in him? Why are you investing in him?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the way they talk.
Country for a reason. Out of 197 countries around the world, we're in the top 7 economically. We are 40 million people.
And the thing is too, we're doing that with a GDP per capita that is very low. That's actually getting lower by the day, and it's not any way, shape, or form because of immigrants. It's the system that exploited immigrants as well as us. To be very clear, immigrants did not sign up to come here and have 3 jobs while they go to school and then work at Tim Hortons and then get kicked back to their country and their student's visa expires and they have no more chance of being in Canada. There's, it's not their fault. But for us to do that as one of our biggest industries is absolutely drowning and our GDP per capita is going down is very impressive. Very impressive that we can still manage that, because logging is a huge part of our GDP and it's tanking. You're in Prince George, it's tanking. And, if we could get, and unfortunately, I don't know what that would look like for immigration. It's supposed to be that they're students. If we could get the cost of living under control, students could come here and we could have part-time or just bring back 30-hour-a-week jobs that, like I was saying, I made a video the other day. I have friends that are Gen X in their, kind of later 40s to later 50s, and they were a cashier at Save-On and single moms with a couple kids, and they bought their house for their kids back in the 90s. You could do that. And they split all those jobs into part-time. If we could put those back into full-time positions, or some of them, it would make a huge difference for people. They could afford housing. And, if we're rolling out UBI, conservatives want to cry about that, then give people that are give them jobs they can live off of. Because I know women that have to work at Walmart part-time, because when they go look for a second job between their children and their shift job that changes all the time, no employer will hire them for a second job. They cannot find a full-time job. They're still trying to get through school. Then how are they supposed to do it? If you don't like people on social supports, then bring back full-time jobs. Boot how many Loblaws positions are full-time? Above minimum wage. Have any benefits?
I spent 7 years being an employment counselor.
Awesome.
And watching the different trends in industry shift, and I'm working to help people connect to government supports during transitions of industry and things like that. And the one thing I know about the government is they don't give a flying fuck about what you want to do with your life. If there's work, you need to move to where the work is. If you're a Red Seal ticketed person, you don't get to change your career because you don't like it, because your career, like logging, died in your area.
Yep.
You have to go to where the logging exists, right?
Then your rent is $3,000 a month. So good luck with that.
All these problems that are more than just the employment themselves, right? more than just the employment themselves. But there was a time, I come from, I grew up in the 70s, late 60s, 70s. There was a time, I grew up one of 6 kids. We knew who was going to go to university, who was going to work in trades, who was going to be the family person. You had like personalities driving your sort of the way you were going to be, especially career wise.
Yep.
When I was in employment counseling, at first, if somebody came in, one of my favorite stories was a person who wanted to learn how to operate cranes.
Yep.
And the only place to train was in New Brunswick. So we successfully funded that person to fly to New Brunswick, get the training, and come back. And also there was somebody who wanted to work in movies. And this is back before what it is today.
Cool.
In prosthetics, and how we got that person funded was the prosthetic makeup piece actually taught them how to do breasts and limbs.
Which is so good.
Yeah, so they had a secondary industry to fall back on. Then what happened in British Columbia here, Gordon Campbell, a conservative wearing a liberal label, Christy Clark, conservative wearing a liberal label,
Yep.
PEI money, and they capped it. You had a cap of $2,500. So that meant if you wanted to use your funding through EI, your privilege, you were limited to what course you could take. $2,500 redirected people into home care, redirected people into basic entry social work, and into basic entry nursing. So they were able to use the money and the capping of it through our EI training dollars to fill the voids in those industries. Just wanted to raise that a little bit.
Which is good. When I went to O'Brien in 2021, what I did is I was coming to the end of my EI. I had been working, and then I left a place where there's some pretty bad racism going on at Shire Green. I don't really like Chris there. The way it was Truth and Reconciliation Day, and he had an orange T-shirt on, and was telling me about how some drunk, crazy Indian was chasing him down the road on Truth and Reconciliation Day. We don't go to Shire Green anymore. I don't go there no more. Right by Petrocan. Just a heads up. So I left there, unceremoniously left there, and I went back to O'Brien, and I spent 3 months. I actually secured $20,000 worth of
Costs
training.
a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to get training. O'Brien, I know that I know them well.
Well, and I didn't do the basic program. So because I'm a pretty smart cookie, actually, when I was a youth, when I was 18, I went into the Nechako treatment program. I was sober. I just had really bad BPD. And Chris Painter was my outreach worker, and he got me in there. And they did some psychological testing on me. And Dr. Bob, I think, was the child psychologist that did it. And I actually scored like genius level on this test, and I basically wrote FU and scribbled out the math portion. It wouldn't do it because I wasn't allowed to smoke, and I still got my IQ was like 178, and I'm a pretty smart cookie, so I managed.
For sure.
I'm a smart cookie. I'm just not. I'm not very socialized. I don't really like dealing with most systems, and it's very hard for me to sit and run a system that I know hurts everybody. It's inefficient, it doesn't work, and it's run by someone that has an IQ probably 40 points lower than mine, and they're doing it wrong for themselves, the business, and everyone, and the client. I'm not going to do it that way. Like, that's why I don't work union. That's why I've never worked at the mill. It's why I work with small contractors where I go, hey, we're doing it this way every night. It's totally backwards. It takes 2 hours longer. Can we do it this way? They're like, yeah, absolutely. Go for it. Totally. They'll come out.
Did you ever hear of the Street Spirits group?
I went to Street Spirits with Andrew, and I did Future Sense in 2007. I loved Yap. Oh.
So then you know who Alan Dawson is.
Yep.
That's my son.
No way. Cool.
My claim to fame. Yeah.
I love Street Spirits. That was such a cool place. Actually, Sarah Clifford, Mary Clifford's daughter was the one, and then her niece, Danielle Gerard. That's who took me to Street Spirits, and then that's when they were talking about Future Sense, and I was just about to graduate high school. I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely doing that program. That's amazing. So
Hidden programs, right? They don't seem to get enough advertisement, but
No.
part of how the political becomes personal is about these systems. This is how you come in contact with politics, right? These were your first initial experiences with with being, your life was affected by the funding,
oh
right?
yeah,
Your life
absolutely.
was affected by that, and I think if people can start exploring how political their personal life is, they would be more willing to engage, and there may be less apathy at the voting booth. And so I'm going to take this moment now, and I'm going to, one last shameless plug, to remind people, please tap and clap. We got 9 people in the room. It hasn't been the biggest live today, but start sharing the live. Tapping is clapping. We almost have 12,000 likes on this live, despite only having a small amount of numbers. So we appreciate that. And any gifts that you want to give to the hosts or some of the guests, all of that moves this out into the algorithm. Beaver Politics, you can subscribe to Beaver Politics, and that gives you access to our Discord. Our Discord is where you carry on these conversations in more detail. You get more articles. You get to post your thoughts and your opinions, and any information that might be useful for the upcoming election, say. And of course, we're now on YouTube. So Beaver Politics is starting to really grow. We have shows 7 days a week now. So there's the shameless plug, and I hope that we can get this live out there. And just appreciate you, Sasquatch and Pasty and Dirtman, for coming up, because that really helps the algorithm to get going out there. So if anybody else wants to join the conversation, we have another half hour to the show. I want to talk about how we can get people to the voting station. Right here on this live, we've got a hyperlink that will take you to the federal election site, and you can register. You can choose to be a TikTok warrior and just go in the comments and just start pushing back on all the conservatives. You see PP for PM, then go in and write MC for PM, just little things like that can start people to feel, help people recognize that conservatives are not the majority. The conservatives, even when they are elected, still only represent about 35% of Canadians because of the way our parliamentary system, our first past the post system works.
Yeah.
Biggest argument in Justin Trudeau not changing first past the post. Okay.
Have we heard anything about? We had Elizabeth May talking about.
It's not happening.
No, because I kind of didn't hear anything about it. And I'm like, regardless of what happens at the federal election, but really, I mean, there might not be an official coalition, but I feel like those 3 parties could still hopefully work together in some measure. I hope. I don't know, because that was so good to hear.
Yeah, I do have, I do have that reassurance that I think that parties through Mark Carney are going to be able to work together. I don't see a divisive nature within him, the way that I see conservatives being conservatives.
And Jake Meat kind of plays ball too. Jake Meat tries to play ball and get things going too. He's pretty cooperative as well. So I don't see Jake Meat being super. He doesn't always go along with everything that I like, but he got the dental plan thing going, so he may have.
Because of my left-leaning tendencies, I always vote NDP. I vote Liberal in this election. It'll be the first time we've done that. But I must say, I love the way that man rose the party back to relevance. The fact that he did this confidence agreement made his little 26 seats one of the most important 26 seats ever in Canada. And when he let that go, that's when he lost his election, right? When he stepped away from all of that, and people seeing that. I mean, I certainly see it as you played your cards too early. You played your cards too early, right? And now we're in the sort of the situation we're in now. And Carney has such momentum that he doesn't need the NDP. So there's not going to be another, kind of confidence agreement. Definitely not a real coalition. But I want Charlie Angus. Where's our Charlie Angus?
Oh, I know. Every time I see him, I'm like, if only we were that lucky. If only we were that lucky. God,
I'm so sad he's retiring because he was in Timmins, which was 4 hours from where I grew up. And had a lot to play with the politics even in Sudbury. I'm so sad that he's not choosing to run again because he's done so many good things for Timmins. Like, yes, Timmins is still terrible, but it has gotten better.
We need our hero. The bottom line is, it doesn't matter who the player is. If you haven't made your moment within 9 years of being the leader, it's not going to happen. No. It's like your time has come, your time is gone. You've given it a good try. You did good things like dental and all that. But Jay Pence has not, and I think our country is too racist, and I think that's why. I don't think it is necessarily, I would, as a true NDPer, I see that he does too many business deals with corporations for my liking.
And that's his platform. And that's Jagmeet's platform. I'm sorry. The reason why I was hopeful with Jagmeet is I was hoping since last year, maybe he saw the error of his ways and was reading the room and going, oh, I just helped bail out Bell when we just subsidized them hundreds of millions in COVID when they were up billions over the last quarter in profit in like 2020 and 2021. We were still giving them subsidies. I'm like, maybe he's learning. Give him a chance. We were talking about taxing the rich, kick out BlackRock. And then I didn't hear anything except, oh, Canadians can't afford to live. I'm like you, and I hate Pierre, and I grew up tough, and I worked hard. Cool. What are you going to do for me now? Because, honey, you're not living hard now. Your wife has land in BC. She's a landlord here in BC. Crimea River. So where's your struggle now? Just because you're doing your daughter's hair, oh, you're so relatable. I don't care. What are you going to do about these promises? And he kind of rode the dental thing, tried to look relatable, smeared PP. That was it. Period. That's the end of it. I'm like, what is that?
I want his conversation to be like Charlie Angus, right? Somebody needs to be a little bit of a strong man. Charlie Angus is not too rude, not too obnoxious, and meets the moment and meets the energy that's coming at him. And I like that, right? I like the calmness of Mark.
Yeah.
Yep. I like that as well. And I think when you look at Canada, we all see our progressives as not aggressive progressive, right? We all like to move forward with the agenda and support everybody along the way. Mark Carney's going to get in. He's going to get in with a sweeping majority, is what my prediction.
100%. And you know what? With Mark Carney, I will say he went up to the Northwest Territories, and that's a good sign right there. I want to see how much of it is going to be image-based. I think Carney is a man of his words. I don't think he's a slogan guy. I don't think he is a big put on the clown makeup and do a little tap dance. I don't see that with Carney. So I'm hopeful seeing he's making sure that people affected by the tariffs are going to have access to their EI faster. So seeing Mark Carney be anticipating the effects of things, that he's realistic. He accepts that things can go on. He accepts worst case scenarios financially. That's very important to being fiscally conservative. As being raised by loggers, yeah, you plan for that to cost you 50 grand. You plan for every machine to break down once a month. You plan for everything to be down the worst case scenario. And he's doing that and anticipating it. And what I'm hoping is that if we have the dental plan, we have UBI rollout, all of these things, we're going to have him anticipate tax brackets changing with stagnant wages, losing jobs, or maybe more part-time positions instead of full-time, and seeing that those tax brackets are stagnant from 15, 20 years ago. The poverty line is 40 grand. So you're telling me if I had 2 kids, I could work minimum wage at 40 hours a week, which I won't find a job with that many hours anyway. And I'm going to be able to save and buy a house for me and my kids.
Yeah, not realistic.
They're not going to be in hockey. They're going to get no gymnastics. They're going to be getting, we're shopping at Value Village. They're getting hand-me-downs from their cousins. And I'm driving a beat-off old Dodge Caravan from 2003 that's going to leave us broke down on the side of the road. It's not, 40 grand is not, for an individual, I'd say the poverty line is closer to 100. Because I couldn't buy a house. I had 2 jobs. And I was making over 100 grand a year. I couldn't get a mortgage. Financially,
You know, I kind of see the election issues in two layers this time. You know, we have what you're talking about is very foundational, right? You got to eat, you know, your food and shelter needs. But we are living for the first time since World War II with an existential threat of democracy.
Yep.
And I think that Mark Carney has been able to calm us, give us some reassurance that way. And I think the way he did that, because as Lori pointed out in the comments here, protecting the Arctic. When he came to power as prime minister, when he assumed the role, he didn't run to Mar-a-Lago and kiss the ring. He went to Australia and United Kingdom and secured our Arctic border.
Yep.
We don't need, NORAD is who we relied on for military support for the Arctic. No. And now here we are needing to worry about whether that support's going to be there. But we don't have to worry now.
And we're talking about Arctic security, but not only is he trying to invade us, he's trying to invade Greenland, which is next to us. So how does that affect our Arctic sovereignty and security when you're invading our neighbors and you're threatening to invade us and you already have a stronghold on the other side? So basically he's trying to take, and he's best friends with Russia.
Yeah.
Huh? Am I catching this? Huh? Canada first, and you guys are in bed and hanging out at Mar-a-Lago with this guy. Huh?
Yeah.
Sovereignty in Canada first where? Canada first where? Billionaires that live in Canada, maybe, that have shares in friggin' Tesla or some pharmaceutical company in the States, maybe. Other than that, oh, hi.
Does anybody else want to come up and join the conversation? We got about 20 minutes left. We have been just yapping away for an hour and 40 minutes here with no problem whatsoever. Appreciate
it's been the small lives. At least there's not a lot of crazies in the small lives. We tend to.
I was nervous.
I just wanted to add, with the whole Greenland being under threat too from the States, technicality, they're our second closest neighbor because we share a border with them after the Whiskey War. The most passive war in history.
I have a friend in England.
I don't know what the Whiskey War is.
Yeah,
So-
very demure.
So the Whiskey War is our borders match on this teeny little island right in the center. And so what would happen is a Canadian person would go over there and plant a Canadian flag and leave a bottle of Canadian whiskey.
Oh, okay.
So then the Greenland people would go over there, plant their flag, take the Canadian bottle of whiskey and leave a bottle of their whiskey. So it's just basically a back and forth. I think it was like going on for like 50 years. I can't remember. I was talking to one of my friends.
Yeah, 50 years.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my friends in Greenland.
Did you
and
make-
talking about this, and because he was joking around. He's like, it was the most peaceful war Canada has ever done.
Yeah.
That's great.
So Canadian, isn't it? It's so Canadian.
And the only time they'd swap out the bottles was if a boat was going past. They didn't go out of their way to do it.
Yeah.
You know, Mark Carney thinking and making those first steps as a prime minister, I think was very strategic. And I know that because of Beaver Politics, we have a lot of guests come on and they express their fear around this existential threat. And Beaver Politics is a place that will listen to your fear because we know it's real. And there's a lot of rooms that would downplay that. And so we can also bring comfort in conversation that, our prime minister, at least for now, if he remains prime minister, we have a plan. We have a plan that is a doable plan. And we have built up the allied partnerships because we had so much partnership with the United States that, we put ourselves in a vulnerable position. It's all shifting now. It's all shifting.
Because of one, the fact that what we have for resources is so universally needed and universally everywhere is needed. And also the fact that we had Trudeau, who was very diplomatic, and she's like the trade minister. Her name's like Mary Ng or something like that. And at the end of 2024, she was doing all these very radical little trips, and she was going off, and it wasn't to the States. She was going to Korea, and she's going to all these different places. And then Carney with that industrial carbon tax, it could not have turned out better for Canada to completely diversify our trade. We just have a pipeline to the West Coast that was kind of built intentionally to diversify trade. That's what it was built for. Now we want to build one the other way because Europe is really in our corner. They've been very openly supportive of us. Now we have, somebody said in New Brunswick it was shot down, the premier in New Brunswick or something shot it down. And I know that in that part of the world, I know even mills, like pulp mills, are very heavily contested. And I know that not just First Nations, but environmentalists are very vocal and very active on the East Coast. After all the fishery debacle, I don't blame them. I respect anything they're doing. And politicians and anyone that's looking to make a pipeline is going to have to do it in a way that they're okay with to make sure that project goes through smoothly. And if anyone's going to do that, it ain't going to be Pierre. Carney might, as he's talking to First Nations people up in the Northwest Territories. Yeah, he might be that guy.
Well,
He might
Irving
be that guy.
go back east, right? Irving's the big player. And
Yeah.
Irving brings in, a lot of the imported oil that comes into Canada to feed the eastern part, right? But the fact that our country, we can have a railway that goes from coast to coast. We should be able to have a pipeline that does this as well. Now, as somebody who's sort of like back in the day as an environmentalist, wanted to change from pipeline to renewable resources. And I've now come to understand, and I want to thank Mr. Global for this, is I've now come to understand how, just how reliant on pipelines and how we have to secure that system before we move on to the next system and or do them simultaneously, right? So I do have some comfort that is going to take place. We are going to fix what the conservatives tore apart in this country. We are going to get self-domestication of our energy resources, of our food, of our energy, of our housing. These are the things that will stabilize our country.
Well, and as someone that's a millennial and lived in Prince George and worked my ass into the ground, we need to do something about the oligarchy, because if there are no checks in place, they're going to continue to get subsidies, use them for stock buybacks, use them to buy out competition, just like the telecommunications have done. And we need to, I don't know if that's, how much of that's federal, provincial, if there's some kind of level of legislative government that controls that. I don't know where that happens. I'm so uneducated, I don't know where that happens. But it should be at a federal level. It should be across the board. We have to take power back for the working class. We need to, because whether, if I am a gay, trans, indigenous, a woman, I've got all of these different issues and my rights are secured. We should, if you have a platform that threatens any of those people, or you make disparaging comments, your ass should be blacklisted from politics. You shouldn't be able to be on a city council for the rest of your goddamn life. Sorry, that's just how that works. And a platform should never have any of those things on the table. But once those things are secure, we still, all of us, have to be able to live. And if you are in a demographic that's still going to have to go out and deal with racists and bigots out in the world, you're going to have more economic disparity. We need to have that system at a level playing field where if we can get legislation to protect them, if, employers are still going to make excuses and not hire people and be bigots, that's how it is. There's always going to be people that find a sneaky way to do that. It's not right. It's what old white guys do. They will say this, that, and the other thing. Oh, you've never run a triaxle dump truck, blah, 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 blah. But they'll hire someone that's never run a dump truck at all. Whatever. That's how they are. I've seen it myself. They love, even as a woman. I'm a white cis woman and I see this, right? So if we can get to a point where we make living affordable, we make working stable, job stability, full-time employment when you're entry level, so that you can put yourself through school, you can buy a house, you can get yourself on level footing, or put yourself through school so you can get skilled in a trade. You're going to go into whatever you want to go into, engineering, you want to go into healthcare, whatever. There has to be that stable ground. And as young people, this is a huge part of radicalization, a huge part of these incels, and a huge part of the apathy of young people. And this is how I was a few years ago. When I was working at the Northern Health Connections bus out in the BCR site, I did admin for them before I got on and had my 2 jobs running loader. I was working there, and she was, oh my God, who was she? She came in and she wanted to talk about politics, and she was trying to give us information. I screamed this lady out of the office. I go, do you know I'm about to start 2 jobs running loader? I'll be working 20 hours a day. Do you know I live in a 1-bedroom apartment on Queensway that's full of cockroaches? Do you know that 3 people got murdered in my building this year and I stepped in someone's brains? Do you know that I have to drive a 4-banger piece of crap car because they steal my block heater and my plug off my car? Do you know that I've gotten tickets because they steal license plates? And I go, I work this hard. I live in a horrible area of Prince George in poverty, and I cannot afford to rent or ever buy and get out. What are you going to do about that?
Politician?
Hmm?
Was that a municipal politician?
Yep. I don't remember who it was. I don't even know if we got her. I don't even remember getting her name because I yelled her out of the office. I'm like,
So
what are you going to do for
our municipality could be doing, right? Prince George definitely has
We don't need to spend $1 million at the Civic Center for that stupid friggin' games and raise the concrete an inch. How many shelters could we have built with that? Low or no barrier shelters, where those people that they complain about being out on the streets are warm. They're not burning dumpsters to stay alive. They're not stealing materials out of your yard to stay, because I was homeless in Prince George. I lived at AWAC for 9 months as a youth. I was homeless in Prince George, and it was freaking cold. And I'm lucky that I was 3-4 weeks of it. I went to AWAC and I went there and I got advocacy. And it's like, you want these people sleeping outside, having no connection to their community. They do not belong. No one is hearing and talking to them and asking them what they need, which is to be warm, have food, a bed, and have any hope that they belong in society. If you don't belong and no one respects you, why wouldn't you go break into someone's car? Why wouldn't you? Who cares? What's the difference? You're going to go back outside tomorrow. Whether you're an upstanding citizen, you go and volunteer at the Council of Seniors tomorrow, you go pick up garbage. It doesn't matter who you are and how good you are. You're still going to get treated like a piece of shit, and there's no resources to help you. I know men that, there was only 40 beds in Prince George for men, and this guy was a skitterman his whole life. I was down at the welfare office there, and I had to give some stubs for my disability because I claimed disability after snow removal for a couple months, and to keep everything with my coverage for my meds, everything for my birth control, I had to turn in stubs, right? Which fine. So I'm down there, and this man had been a skitterman for 30 years. His employer found a loophole, so this guy never did get any workers' comp or anything like that. He flipped a skidder and broke his neck. His wife took his house and took the kids and left. He had absolutely nothing. He couldn't afford rent on top of her having the home and paying child support and alimony. Then he lost his job and couldn't work. And this guy's telling me, he's like, oh my God, it's like 3:30. He goes, I'm not going to get a bed tonight. I'm not going to get a bed. And I look at him, I go, I don't know what you need to do at this office today. Can I give you a ride so you get a bed tonight? He's like, well, if I don't do that, then I can't get my check, then I can't cab around, and I can't get to this, and I can't get to my meetings, and I have to go and appeal this decision, or I can't work. My neck is broken. How am I supposed to run a skidder? And I'm like, I ran skidder. You can barely climb. You wouldn't handle the bush road to your block with a broken neck, let alone ride in a skidder. There's no way.
That person had a lot of social problems, right? And not one.
And he was a white, cis, straight, married, blue-collar man that paid a shitload of taxes for 30 plus years in a blue-collar industry. And you know what's really sad? He goes, you know what? I'm kicking myself because I voted conservative every step of the way. And I go, that cuts programs that you need now. And I go, if you ever go back to logging or you work at the mill or whatever, tell people that they are just one accident away. And there are people I know that have been hurt at Canfor. Their family was hurt at Canfor. They were injured on the oil field. You are one.
One of the problems in reaching out to cis white men is that they feel lost in the minority conversation, because it doesn't matter that they are the majority. I mean, the majority of Canadians are still white. They're still Christian. They're still, that demographic. However, if you're the person living in poverty, it doesn't matter what color you are, right? It's your class can supersede some of the other problems that you're experiencing. And so if you've got that cis white male in front of you who can't put food and shelter in front of them, then there's no space to move on to the other kind of bigger things in life, like voting conservative or not conservative. They have to spend time stabilizing. And for the first time in Canada, I think with this housing crisis, is that we have moved the rung. That the people who existed in like the lower middle class have now come down below that, or like not even middle class, but there's this rung where people are experiencing housing insecurity for the first time in their lives, right?
Oh, yeah.
Gen
Xers that haven't bought, or elder millennials that haven't bought, that are blue collar and just weren't really concerned about it, or a lot of men that they wanted that woman that wanted to stay home and they wanted to be that provider. Now women have left and gone, I'm not staying married to you. I'm taking the kids and I'm going. Well, you're obligated to pay child support, alimony, split your assets. These men are now in a position where they can't support the two households. They are in that group as well. Some of them get the error of their ways. Most of those are a lot of incels too, because I'm in that 35-year-old age group where I'm talking to these men that have already gone through that cycle, and they talk to me, and you go for coffee and they sit and bitch about their wife. I go, don't tell me that, because I had my abortion and went back to work. No man paid my rent. I did not take mat leave. I do not have dependents on my tax file, and no man pays my bills or half my bills or a quarter of my bills. So go bitch to her. Don't talk to me about it, because I've been out here working. And in my 20s, while I was working and you wanted a woman to be at home, you picked her. So bye, and I'll walk out of a date. Like, I don't fucking care. Like, the neighbors here, they're all bitching about their exes. You wanted the man that would change your oil and would buy you a Can-Am quad and a sled, and you wanted to drive a Denali even though you worked 20 hours a week in an office. And you wanted a woman that was home all the time to cook and clean so she doesn't contribute financially. You were codependent. I do both by myself. I don't want to hear any of it. That's on you. You only wanted to do half the work, so you each only did half. Now you're both screwed. Bye. Sorry. Sounds like a you problem, because I can pull 20 and I'll go home and make a good meal, and I go to my appointments and my meds are picked up and my house is clean, and I have a friend circle and I go to therapy. So I don't know what you're doing, and I wrench on my own car, so I don't know what you're doing with your time. I figured it out, and I'm broke.
Oh, there's so many conversations. I just want to be cognizant of the time here. It's time to wrap up the show.
Oh, wow.
This has been a very interesting conversation. I think we spent 2 hours on really narrowing down some of the pieces. But I want to end the show by saying a thank you to the 3 guests that have been here today. And I want to remind people about how to get involved with the voting, right? So down below, above where you share and where you make your comments, there's a link that you can register for the federal election. We have smartvoting.com, where you can go and have a look at what's happening in your riding to see if a strategic vote might be something you're interested in. I want to encourage people who are here on TikTok. A lot of people, especially in daytime, people, we're people who live with disabilities and may not be, a lot of people are out employed right now at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right? But that doesn't mean you can't be a keyboard warrior. you start putting out the comments and pushing back on PP for PM and pushing back on lies like Mark Carney was on the flight list for Trump's Epstein's Island, you know, just the bullshit that's coming out, the misinformation, the propaganda that's coming from Russia right now through our Conservative Party players. We really have to make people more aware, and so we can put some pushback. And you don't have to put yourself out there like we do today, show your face, all that. You can put yourself out there by just making a video that says ABC with a cute little song behind it, right?
Even reposting good information. You bet. Yep.
So I want to just give you each an opportunity, and Sasquatch, I'll let you go last. But Pasty Native, do you want to say anything just to kind of wrap up your conversation here today?
Thank you for having me up. I'm also going to do a shameless plug if you're okay with it. Tomorrow, Beaver Politics has mine and Sean's wonderful show called The Rainbow Connection, and we will be breaking down the Conservatives, why am I forgetting the word? But essentially their plan and what it means for LGBTQIA people and our rights that are going to be heavily impacted if the Conservatives manage to get in. Sadly. But again, thank you for having me up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pasty. That conversation tomorrow is going to be interesting. I want to know what the legislative pieces are. I really, I want to see the boots on the ground on this one. So I'm looking forward to you guys even discussing it. Dirt Man.
Thanks for having me up.
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised to get drug up. I wasn't expecting it.
There you are.
Yeah. With me, I try to like sit in politics live, and it's just like I get too overwhelmed, and I just like I have to scroll on. It's just a constant yelling, and it's like here I actually feel welcome. Like I love your message. I love everything that you're saying because you're not screaming at everybody like you're wrong. And I hate when people do that and overtalk people because then you can't even get what you want to say out.
I think that, Beaver Politics, we strive to have that format in every single show. Because, and as a matter of fact, when we first started Beaver Politics a year ago, that was why we were doing it. It was a response to not being able to hear, because we can hear left-wing voices in the lives, but over the name calling and stuff, we couldn't hear the message. And we would be like, you, scroll on. But I knew those messages were needing to be said. And so we created Beaver Politics. And our very first, we just honed in the conversation, an uninterrupted opportunity for our guests to be able to share their knowledge, experiences, and their opinions. And then open it up to conversations. But even then, we're not going to allow abuse in these rooms, period.
Yeah.
So thank you for acknowledging that. I really did.
Yeah. And quick thing, I was going to say this earlier, but everyone was talking and I just didn't want to. How Sasquatch is, because she's in Mackenzie right now. My brother is in Mackenzie and he works at Parallel 55.
So does my dad. Yeah, he's logging supervisor.
Yeah, my brother's the supervisor there now. But my brother's been there nearly 9 years. He moved from Quesnel because he couldn't find any work and moved to Mackenzie. And he got hired on at Parallel 55 as a board flipper and he's been there for so long, he's worked his way up. And that's the one thing is, like, I can see where Sasquatch is coming from because it's if you got there now, there's so many new people because, they don't want to hire new people.
Well, and a lot of it, too, is the fact that twinning of the pipeline is done. So not only do you have people working specifically on that pipeline, you have to have guys to log that right away. So tons of guys came here from like Alberta specifically, Saskatchewan, south of us, out like west of PG. Lots of guys came here. It is flooded here. As an operator, even with like 6 years experience, probably 15,000 hours experience in machines. If you don't have 20 years or you're not some guy's nephew, you're not getting in. If I'd come here 5 years ago, I probably could have gone on at the pipeline, and I should have, but I waited until my mom was sick, and I came here, and I should have just not bothered. I should have just helped her from afar, given the money and work.
The doors are going to open up. Anyway, while you're talking, do you want to use this opportunity to just kind of wrap the show up for us?
So, you know, in terms of our riding in specific and having Bob Zimmer, it does feel very hopeless and it feels overwhelming because we've had conservatives for 40 years in this riding. But just remember that in those 40 years, look how this riding has changed financially. If you are blue collar, if you support harvesting of resources, if you are on that side of things, look what the conservatives have done, and that's not a lot. And they can cry in the face until they're blue in the face about liberals. What has Zimmer done? Rustad. Look what he did. He ran Rustads into the ground. Like, what have they done versus you have liberals working to have pipelines put up and put through? Haven't heard Mark Carney talk about the softwood agreement. I'm interested to see what he does, and I'm interested to see if Zimmer's going to yap about it. If Doherty's going to yap about it, then you better be out representing us federally, and you better be there talking to the financial expert and have some numbers from your riding on the impacts of that logging industry going down. Do some work. Say X amount of jobs in this, X amount of jobs, X amount of jobs, X amount of jobs. We could have growth of this many jobs, this many jobs. If we got X amount of pulp mills back up, if we had X amount of tariffs on raw wood so that we would have mills open back, do some work and some math and present something to Carney. You're not going to see that from our guys. Maybe Carney will take the initiative because in our riding up here, logging is a hot topic interest, and then nothing's been done by the conservatives up here, period. They've whined. Now they're sitting here whining about Carney. They're whining about Trudeau, whining about the Liberals. What have you concretely pointed out? Because you know what? When Wab Canoe went to Trudeau within 48 hours, he had funding to get those women out of the landfill. Yeah. If you talk to Liberals and do your due diligence and bring proposal forward, Liberals will give you federal funding to do things. You have to have a plan to implement it. So that's if anyone's conservative and in that Prince George Peace kind of riding, think long and hard about that because they're not doing anything. And if maybe we vote Liberal or even NDP here, maybe they'll actually be proactive because NDP is pretty proactive. As much as I don't think federally they're going to do anything on a provincial level, NDP is very proactive. And maybe we can get NDP in on a provincial level to talk to Carney about the logging industry because that would be a huge financial benefit to BC. We've got that pipeline twinned. Let's get logging back on the ground.
I think what you just said is key, right? It's about partnershiping with the different levels of government. And even though we are we're surrounded by the conservative blue wave in the north for like 20, 50 years.
Yep.
We've had a thorough discussion about some of the supports that are already existing within our community, where they're not there because of conservatives. They're there because of the progressiveness of the people and the boots on the ground work that's being done, despite the conservative umbrella.
Yep.
Now, the conservative leader here, Zimmer, is our member, and he's kind of beats on, what he talks about? He talks about guns, right?
He talks about guns and conversion therapy. And then he talks about how Native women get murdered because they need a job. That's your conservative leader for the last 15 years. That's what he's been talking about. I haven't heard him stand up and talk about logging anywhere.
One piece of legislation. Tell me one piece of legislation that Zimmer has written and moved forward to be enacted or to have partnerships with other parties to move forward his ideas.
Just like Pierre. Just like Pierre. Yeah. Just like Pierre. Nothing.
Anyways, 10 after 9 or 10 after 3, folks. So it's time to wrap it up. Please like and share all of the Beaver Politics stuff. We're on 7 days a week. You can go to our homepage and you're going to find out that we have Indigenous Matters on Monday. We have the news show on Tuesday. We have a show out of Ontario about capitalism on Wednesday. On Thursday, we have Truth and Discord. discourse. On Friday, we have our big debate. Very spicy night on the Friday night.
It's gonna be good.
Radical, and he talks a lot about religion, resources, and region, right? And he talks about the importance of those things.
Yep.
And then we move into our daytime shows, and that includes me on Thursdays on Finding Your Own Damn Way. On Fridays now, we have the Rainbow Connection with Sean and Casey Nada. Saturday, we have Mental Health with Jana. And on Sunday, we have Zen and Urban, which are working with the homelessness conversation. And then Happy is doing a show on how people find happiness. We're your one-stop shop to talk about politics. So please come and follow the Beaver Politics page, like, share, get us out there. And much appreciation to everybody that joined in on the conversation today.
Thanks for having me today. I had a fun time.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.